Hi, this is Mac of Mac's List. Find Your Dream Job is presented by Mac's List, an online community where you can find free resources for your job search, plus online courses and books that help you advance your career. My latest book is called Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. It's a reference guide for your career that covers all aspects of the job search, including expert advice in every chapter. You can get the first chapter for free by visiting maxlist.org/anywhere. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, we're talking about how to get the experience you need to switch careers. You're ready to change careers. Employers tell you, however, that you don't have the necessary experience, and you don't have the money to go back to school to get a new degree or become a full-time volunteer. This week's guest expert is Alexis Perrotta. She says there's another way to get the experience employers want when you change careers. Alexis and I talk later in the show. You and other candidates for a job likely have the same set of technical qualifications. Ben has found an article that says one way you can stand out is to sell your soft skills. He tells us more in a moment. You're ready to go to a networking event, but a quick online search reveals an overwhelming number of places you could go. How do you choose? That's our question of the week. It comes from Nicole Larsen of Portland, Oregon. Becky shares her advice in a moment. As always, let's check in with the Mac's List team, and we're going to turn to you, Ben, because every week you're out there searching the nooks and crannies of the internet, and you're looking for those tools, books, websites our listeners can use in a job search and in managing a career. So what have you uncovered for listeners this week?
So this week I want to talk about soft skills. And I think this applies to folks who are looking to change careers and also people who are starting out their job search who might not have a whole lot of applicable experience when they're trying to get into the job market. I remember when I was just out of college and I had like a degree that really didn't apply to the modern job market outside of Washington, D.C., and I tried to like fluff up my resume with a bunch of soft skills. Like, I'm great at cross-cultural communication and I have great interpersonal skills and all other stuff like that. And at the time it didn't work. And I was wondering, like, has anyone else tried that here with their applications, or especially early on in their career or when they're trying to do something different?
Yeah, I definitely used that type of method. I feel like it's still, I don't know, I'm a liberal studies major, so I feel like that generally has been applicable in my career. And so like the interpersonal skills, those are really important, especially when you're applying for jobs that are customer service related, or sometimes the cross-cultural communication is really relevant to the job description.
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to put down those soft skills. I guess, when I was thinking back on my experience, like I graduated with a degree in political science, which is not a vocational track. Like there's no like clear next step there. I didn't want to go into politics. I didn't want to work on Capitol Hill.
It's very open-ended.
It's open-ended. And so I was like trying to like talk about transferable skills. Like I was a good writer, but I was using these soft skills to pitch myself to a bunch of other jobs where you probably needed some more hard experience. And so I know that's really frustrating when you start talking about soft skills because like they're soft for a reason. It's hard to get your hands around them and know exactly what they are and how to sell them.
So Ben, what's your quick definition of soft skills as opposed to hard skills?
They're so soft, you know them when you feel them. I would say soft skills are the kind of baseline underlying abilities that you have that aren't necessarily vocationally taught. And I'm not being really articulate here, but writing, communication, people skills, things like that where you acquire listening, where you acquire them through practice and through work, but it's not the kind, you don't take a course in college on listening, right?
Yeah.
You don't get a graduate degree in listening, but it's the kind of skill that you develop over time. And some people are really good at it and some people aren't.
It's the emotional intelligence side of things, I think.
Thank you. You're my emotional intelligence person. I've got an emotional intelligence person.
Yeah.
So on point here. So, this whole challenge of soft skills, I was looking into it this week, thinking about people who wanted to transition to careers and sell their soft skills. And I found this really interesting article from the American Marketing Association, their careers page. It's by an author, Dan Schwabel. And his point is that soft skills can help you in an interview or when you're applying for a job. If the other candidates have the same basic skill set for the job, you can really upsell yourself on the soft skills. But it works best if you can relate your soft skills to the company and the position you're applying for. And he outlines this 3-step model that I thought was really good because I think sometimes people just throw out the soft skill and just expect that the employer knows why this is valuable to them.
Right.
And you really have to contextualize it a little bit more. So Dan's 3-step model is first, identify a small handful of soft skills that are relevant to the job. And he says the rule of 3 applies here. If you're listing off 400 soft skills, you're already lost, right? Focus on 3, and they should be 3 that are most relevant to the employer. Then the next step.
And probably your strongest as well, because if they're not really your strongest, you're not going to sell it very well.
Exactly. And the next step is you have to back up each item you identify as a skill. So it's not enough to say, I'm a great cross-cultural communicator. You actually have to have some proof in your background of why you're actually a great cross-cultural communicator. So, for example, if you say writing is one of your soft skills, here are several articles that were published in a local paper that I wrote. Or cross-cultural communication. Here's a good example. You might say, I spearheaded a local exchange program between Boring, Oregon and Dole, Scotland, right? Where you're showing some proof of this soft skill because it's soft. It's hard to find a proof of it otherwise. Mm-hmm. And then third, you have to explain why it's important to the employer and relevant to the job. Again, don't assume that the employer is going to see the value in this. You literally have to tell them, this skill is going to be important to you because, the writing on your website is not very good and I can improve it on day 1 when I start there. You probably don't want to diss the employer's website.
Yeah. Don't say it's not good, but it has room for improvement. I saw some ways to improve this, and here's how.
This is why you're the emotional intelligence person. Thank you, Jessica.
It's true. It is one of my inherent qualities.
Okay, so I'm the analytical guy. I got to ask, Ben, you mentioned Boring, Oregon, and Boring is a real place in Oregon. It exists.
It is.
Is there, in fact, a Dole, Scotland?
It is their sister city.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
I didn't know that.
Really?
Yes.
And I think they have a third one. Didn't you tell me that? They have a third one that's
Ennui?
some other thing that's a synonym of boring and dull.
Oh, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, you should.
Mind-numbing England.
Yeah.
Boring is a place. I've actually driven through it plenty of times.
Yeah, it's not very far from Portland.
They've got a big sign that says, sister cities with Dole, Scotland.
Yeah.
Bland?
Bland, yeah, exactly.
Where is Bland, Becky?
I'm Googling right now.
Okay.
This is live for the podcast, guys.
When my hometown in Iowa, the neighboring community was Bettendorf, and their tagline in the late 60s when I was a boy was, Iowa's most exciting city. And it made us all laugh. Iowa and excitement were 2 ideas that usually didn't end up in the same sentence.
It is Blandshire, population 6,000 in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Okay.
So on that note,
So back to Dan Schwabel.
we will have the full URL in the show notes. And if you're someone who's struggling to try to figure out how to get your soft skills aligned around a job position, I suggest you check it out.
Well, great tip. I think this is, we're having a lot of fun talking about it, but soft skills do matter a lot to employers. And if you want to stand out in the interview process, being able to demonstrate that you've got those skills, I think is a real advantage.
Yeah, and if I tried to, if it sounded like I was putting them down, again, I was not. I think they're so important, but they're only important if you put them in the right context. If you just kind of throw it out there, they turn into a joke, right? Because everyone says they're a great communicator on the resume.
Exactly, and it doesn't take the place of the technical skills to do the job. It's just an additional bonus, and it adds to your candidacy and relevance. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, if you've got your own suggestion for Ben, please write him. We'd love to share your idea on the show, and Ben's address is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to Becky Thomas, and she is here to answer one of your questions. Becky, what's in the mailbag this week?
This week's question comes from Nicole Larsen. She's here in Portland. And she asks, what is the best way to select opportunities and events to network? I'm new to Portland and I'm overwhelmed by the variety of events going on. What's worth my time? This is a legit question, Nicole. Thank you for asking
There's
it.
a lot of events in Portland.
I've definitely gone to my fair share of events where I was like, this wasn't really worth my evening. Whether or not, I don't know. I think that's sort of a side thing. But I think the first thing you need to really think about when you're looking for opportunities to network is what your goals are. So and I think that sort of relates to your career goals as well. If you're working on entering a new industry or growing skills in new areas, you might want to target more events that are sort of learning-based, panel discussions, workshops, and seminars. But if you're really just wanting to meet people in the field that you are already in and that you want to find a new job in, sort of following the existing path that you're on, you might want to do more sort of opportunities to meet people, more casual mixers, happy hours, and just casual meetups, things like that. So I think the first thing you need to do when you're looking at networking events is think about what you want to get out of them. And that will help you decide the types of events you want to go to. And then I think the simplest approach when you're just there's so many, I don't know where to start, I think the best way to go is to start with a networking event that's pretty well known, whether it's popular locally, there's a lot of people in your industry that go to this specific event, or a really sort of easy one is to go to a known professional organization, a national organization in your industry that has, there's professional folks that are members and they have regular events. For me, it's the American Marketing Association, which Ben just mentioned in his resource. They have regular events. I know they're going to be of high quality and they're going to be people in my industry. So it's a good sort of safe bet for you to get started networking. And so just go to one of those events, one that looks interesting to you, is up your alley, and then really just get started chatting with people and asking them what events they go to, what events they like, and where they find value in the networking that they're doing. And I think you'll quickly get clued in that way, and then just start sort of checking out the events that people are recommending. They've already been vetted by the people that you're networking with and meeting. And then you can check them out and see if they're a good fit for you. And so that will help you, I think, hone down your focus quite a bit. And I think that will help a lot. I don't know. That was my sort of simple approach. And I think that it's definitely true that networking takes time. And I think it's, things to remember is, number one, get focused on what you want to achieve. And then find, the first sort of well-known event that you can check out and go from there.
Yeah.
You hit on this. I mean, my suggestion would be ask someone who is in the field you want to be in, right? So, one of the things you can ask in an informational interview is, hey, what events should I be going to given what you understand about my interests?
Yeah.
And someone who's already got their feet wet in the field is going to be able to give you a good sense of what's worthwhile or where you can make the right connections for the search you're going through right then. I'd also say most events, unless it's a really big dud, you can probably extract value from almost any networking event.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you're going to go to an event where this was not as good as something else I could have gone to tonight. But you never know who you're going to meet at these things. And you might not meet anyone who's in your industry, but you might meet someone whose wife is in their industry or whose husband knows someone who's in the company you really want to work for. You just never know the kind of connections you're going to make. That's kind of the serendipity of networking.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And I was sort of choosing to believe that Nicole was referring to how to choose between two events happening on the same day rather than if it's going to be a bad event, because I think that you can get a lot of good value from all of the events that you go to. But I do think, Becky, like you were saying, honing in on what industry and what what you're looking to get out of it is going to be really helpful. But at the same time, I know that it's very overwhelming to look online and see the just sheer amount of events, but I think that that's a really good way to just know what's out there, and that helps you process, at least that's the way I do it, is when you aren't really sure, there's a couple different, or you don't know what types of large organizations are out there that have networking events. That really helps you get an idea of what's out there. And so using that as just sort of a research method, and then starting to, I mean, you guys all brought up very good points, starting to narrow that down and talk to other people. I think also you could, kind of related to what Ben was saying, look on LinkedIn profiles of people that you in your desired industry, or of people who have careers that you are aspiring to, and seeing what types of groups they're involved in. And they may not have everything up to date, but that's a really good way to know kind of what groups are really relevant and interesting, and ways to start building those connections, especially, if you don't want to do the cold reach out for an informational interview, going to some of these networking events where some of the same people are going to be there, then that way you can start making those connections and, again, start talking to other people and seeing what other events are out there to look at.
The only thing I would add to all this excellent advice is think about the outcome you want at the end of the evening. And typically, for me, if I can have 2 or 3 conversations with someone who is a leader or a player in the field that is represented by that event, that to me is a successful night. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to your point. When I think about that outcome, Becky, often people want to meet the leaders in their industry. So I love your advice about asking people where the leaders, where they go, what associations are they involved in.
Yeah.
That'll help you narrow the list pretty quickly.
Right. When you've got a personal recommendation from somebody in your industry, like that's way better than, I think, like just sort of finding something and going to it randomly.
Yeah, because people have already figured this out and they're going to those places. So tap into that knowledge.
And they know the community.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Becky, and thank you, Nicole, for that terrific question. If you've got a question of your own, send Becky an email. Her address is becky@maxlist.org. You can also call our listener line. That number is area code 716-JOB-TALK, or send us a message on the Max List Facebook page. Now, if we use your question on the show, you'll get a free copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. We'll be back in a moment. When we return, I'll talk with this week's guest expert, Alexis Perrotta, about how to get the experience you need to switch careers. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Alexis Perrotta. Alexis Perrotta is an editor and writer for Idealist Careers. In her blog post, Alexis offers job seekers, game changers, and do-gooders actionable tips, career resources, and social impact lifestyle advice. As a lifelong nonprofit professional, Alexis enjoys sharing her experience and insight with other passionate social impact professionals. She joins us today from Brooklyn, New York. Alexis, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Our topic this week, Alexis, is how to get the experience you need to switch careers. And I know you talk to job seekers a lot, as do we here at Max List. And one of the things I think we both hear is from people who are frustrated because they are doing one career and they're ready to make the switch. But when they talk to employers about it, it can be challenging to make the case that you've got the skills that you need to make that change. So often people think the first thing that they might need to do is get a new degree, maybe a master's or other graduate degree. But you've found that people can get that experience in other ways. So could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So there are definitely a variety of ways depending on, kind of how much time you have on your hands, how tech savvy you may be. But they all kind of fall in the categories of either volunteering, pro bono work, and even personal projects. So I think the key, no matter how you go about it, is finding a way to make your experience come across as professional, even if it's unpaid or volunteer experience, and to really find a way that you could share it widely, which I've found is generally making sure that at least part of your work lives online.
I love the idea of sharing work online, and I know some people do personal websites. Have you seen examples of personal websites people have used professionally to help make the case for switching a career that you like, and what do you like about them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a personal website does a lot of things. So a lot of people would be probably a little bit hesitant to put unpaid experience on their resume. So a personal portfolio, a digital portfolio is a great place to share some of that unpaid work that you're still really proud of. And, like I mentioned, it gives you a really professional platform to do it. Some of the other things that work really well on a website are you can kind of get as creative as you have time to be. There are lots of tools that you could find to make your website really visually engaging. There are a lot of great platforms where you don't need to be a developer or anything close to a developer in order to put together a website. And then the last thing that I find really useful and probably underutilized when it comes to putting together a personal portfolio digital website is taking advantage of this opportunity to show a potential employer that you're a great communicator. You're creating this website and this website needs copy on it and you're the one who's going to put it together. So why not take the time to really make this look like a real website and show off your skills in every corner of the site that you possibly can.
Now, Alexis, are there off-the-shelf software packages people can use to create these personal sites? Because I can imagine listeners thinking, "Oh gosh, I've got a LinkedIn page. Shouldn't that do the job for me? Why do I need this personal website?"
Sure. And there are some customizations that you could do on LinkedIn. If you just Google how to customize my LinkedIn page, there are a few ways that you can actually stand out on LinkedIn also. So I wouldn't say that that's not a great start. But there are platforms like Squarespace, which happens to be what I personally use. But I know that there are plenty of competitors out there that also make starting your digital portfolio really accessible and easy, even if you're not a developer. I think Squarespace is awesome. You can jump in, you can pay a very small fee and kind of get what you need and then decide if you want to kind of take it to the next step and make it, even more of a built out professional site.
So Squarespace or another company like that offers websites where you can share your work. And before you create it, let's back up. How do you make that strategic choice, Alexis, about how you're going to get that experience? You mentioned three options. One was personal projects, a second was volunteering, and a third was pro bono work. How do you recommend that listeners figure out which strategy is going to be best for them?
Sure. So I think that one thing that's really important, especially when you're doing unpaid work, in order to build your professional experience in your resume, you'll want to make sure that whomever you're working with is okay with you sharing the results and the deliverables from your work, because if not, then you kind of have nothing to show for it. The other thing I'll say is to try to choose work that has a measurable impact. And even if it's really kind of informal, or even if you're choosing those goals yourself, if you're setting your own goals, that's fine. As long as you could show that you've reached those goals, that's all the better to add to your website or your resume.
Now, I know you talk to a lot of job seekers in your work at idealist.org. Can you give us examples or maybe share a story or two of people who've used this approach, what they did and the kind of results they got?
Yeah, so one really great example is there was a particular person that we had been in touch with who was working to transition into a grant writing position. And this was her idea. What she did was she invented a grant proposal. So she found a nonprofit that she would be interested in working for, did a good amount of research to figure out what kinds of grants might be the appropriate kind of grant for this particular organization. And then she filled out a grant proposal as though she worked at this organization. So she really just went ahead and invented her own project, but made it a professional deliverable. So was able to put together a report and put it on her website. And, regardless of whether this was the organization that she ultimately ended up working with, she now has a real professional deliverable that she can feature on her site, even though it was unpaid.
And was she in touch with the organization before she prepared that proposal?
No.
Oh,
no,
interesting.
This is just a particular place that sparked her interest. We encourage our job seekers to do an exercise called a target employer list. And this is really just expanding your search beyond a particular position and thinking more about the organization as a whole that you may be interested in working for, just because it can uncover some roles that maybe you didn't consider initially. Anyway, so this is how she came across this organization and decided that she wanted to try to get that experience on her resume to work for this type of an organization.
And I'm curious what happened. Did that open some doors for her after she posted that work sample?
It wasn't immediate, but it was a great way to show an organization that she was able to kind of learn the skills that she needed to learn, the very specific writing skills for being a grant writer. And I believe in the end, she did ultimately make the transition to a grant writer role, but it wasn't immediate. But it's all about building your portfolio and making sure that you're making it very public so folks can see it when you start applying.
So this sounds like kind of a medium or a long-term strategy. Is that right, Alexis? Should people expect to invest some time in preparing these kinds of work samples and portfolios?
Yeah, I think the same way that anybody would tell you, even though people might groan to hear it, that you should be keeping your resume updated even when you're not looking for a job. This is really a great way to make sure that you're tracking all of your projects and all of your objectives reached, even when you're not looking, just so that you're kind of ready to go if something should come up or if your situation should change.
You mentioned earlier that you all encourage people to identify the employers they want to work with and the kind of work they want to do. Are there other strategic choices you recommend people consider and make when they're when they're in the process of getting this kind of experience to make a career switch?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said about finding as much time as you can before, if you're lucky enough to be employed while you're looking for another job and you're looking to switch sectors, really dedicating the time to considering whether the work is a fit for you. And the only way to find out whether the work is a fit for you without making the actual leap is to make the room in your day and your schedule to pick up these volunteer assignments, pro bono assignments, do a lot of research. So, I suggest to anybody who's interested and willing to commit the time to try to pick up a project while you're still employed full time, just to see how it all feels and how it all fits.
And is there an ideal length of time for a project? Do you think it's better to do a series of short-term projects or take on a commitment that might last months or even a year?
I think it just depends on the particular individual and what they have time for and what they're interested in doing. I personally took this advice years ago, and I was doing some pro bono work that lasted. It took about a year. I was working on all of this before I felt like I really built up my portfolio enough to make the transition from government into the nonprofit sector. I think depending on what the deliverable is, if it's some marketing materials or if it's a grant or if it's even just analyzing some Google Analytics data, that can all be done short term. It just depends on where you're looking to go with it.
And the example you shared a moment ago was about someone who did a project without actually contacting the organization, but it was a valuable work sample. What if you want to do some volunteer work or a pro bono project for an organization, what's the best way to approach them?
Well, everybody probably knows that the ideal situation would be keeping your network fresh, again, while you're not looking for a job, because nobody really wants to hear from somebody if they're just asking for a favor. I would say if that is not your situation, and of course it can't always be that ideal situation, the next thing I would suggest is reaching out to one of these organizations and trying to make a contact, but offering your services, not asking for a job, not asking for freelance work or anything like that, but offering them a solution and starting the conversation that way. I would say the last resort really is reaching out and kind of cold calling about job opportunities.
Sometimes I meet, and I bet you do too, people who volunteer for an organization or do a short-term project, and they become frustrated because they hope that it will lead to a job offer. What would you say to people like that who who have that expectation or that hope, rather?
I think it's always a fair hope, especially if you're doing volunteer work and you really fall in love with an organization. Sometimes it works out that way, and that's fantastic. And we get some really great success stories from our readers where it does work out that way. But if it doesn't work out that way, I just think it's really important for people to remember that this experience is going to count for something. And it may be a connection that you made while you were volunteering. It may be that your name just kind of stuck in the head of your volunteer supervisor. Or it may be somebody that you meet later on down the line and they look at your resume in your volunteer experience section and say, oh, you volunteered for XYZ. I used to be on their board or whatever. But aside from, just generally feeling good about the work that you're doing and supporting a nonprofit, there's always going to be some sort of benefit to the individual when they volunteer. It may not be that volunteer to paid work path that so many people hope for.
And we've talked about doing volunteer work, and what if you don't have the skills that you might need to make a switch to a new career? What's your best advice, Alexis, about how to get those skills without having to return to school and getting a graduate degree or a new undergraduate degree?
I would say try to use the things that are most available to you. And for most of us, that, the number one thing on that list is the internet. There are tons of places online where you can find some of this information, and you can even get free certifications or free workshops or very inexpensive opportunities for online learning. So I would say, check YouTube, check, there are fantastic sites like edX and TED-Ed, Philanthropy U, go to your local library. There are just so many opportunities right now for free or very low cost online learning that'll actually give you some hard skills. And again, I would always caution, you wouldn't want to list this as, in the same section as your undergraduate degree, but find some space on your resume to list relevant coursework so you can highlight the fact that you had the interest and you took the time and you actually sat through the coursework to make the move.
Well, terrific. Now tell us what's next for you, Alexis.
So at Idealist Careers in October, we actually just launched our brand new website. So we're a publication of idealist.org. And we're getting that up and running and moving forward. We're going to be really expanding on some of the assessments and functionality and other job seeker tools that we offer on the site. So there are going to be a lot of fun and engaging new ways to check out the site and take advantage of all of the tools that we offer.
Well, I know people can find the updated site by visiting idealistcareers.org, and we'll be sure to include that URL in the show notes. Alexis, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
we're back in the MaxList studio. What are people's thoughts about my conversation with Alexis from Idea List?
I liked her advice about being strategic in the choices you make for volunteer work and pro bono projects, to look at sort of the types of projects that have like a clear measurable impact or a goal. And also, I think the key is that they're comfortable with you sharing that work so that you can actually like put that on your personal website or on your LinkedIn or, in your portfolio. Because like it's great to volunteer, but when you're trying to switch careers and you need that experience to show that you can do that specific thing, then you need to be able to share that with prospective employers and sort of use that to market yourself. So I think that's key when you're looking at those opportunities.
Yeah, that's huge. And they might also be really, finding opportunities that they're also really excited because that's sort of free marketing for them as well.
For sure.
But I agree. I liked her points about making sure that you have a personal website or some sort of portfolio that you can have a platform to demonstrate the things that you're doing, whether that's LinkedIn, customized LinkedIn, or something very specific. Because certain industries, you need something separate from LinkedIn, but sometimes LinkedIn will do just fine, I think. But I think the key is just making sure that you document what you're doing and what you are taking on and how you are showing that you are capable of this type of stuff.
Yeah, I like the showing, not telling. And
Right.
Becky, I'm really glad you brought up the strategic choice, because if you're trying to figure out what the gaps are that employers will have concerns about when you want to switch careers, ask them. And ask them what are the gaps in your experience that you need to plug. And the answers that you get back will help you figure out what kind of volunteer experiences or pro bono projects can help you plug those gaps.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about finding that focus.
Yeah.
So I like her emphasis on doing a pro bono project. I would just like to put out there that when you choose the organization you want to do free work for, I think it should be a passion area for you and an organization perhaps where you aren't expecting to ever get a job. Because I'm always really dubious about any organization that expects people to do work for free as like some prerequisite to hiring them. I don't think it's appropriate for employers to ask you to put together like a full marketing plan before they even have offered you a job. And so, I think you should do this because you're passionate about the organization or the cause and you want to get some experience under your belt, but not because you're necessarily looking at this specific organization as a potential employer. I mean, if it happens, great, but I don't think you should go in with the expectation for that.
I love that.
I agree too.
Yeah.
So do I.
I am glad that you brought that up because I think I was going into it with, doing volunteer projects as volunteer projects and not with the expectation that you're going to get a job. But I think that distinction is very important to make, that, doing it as something that you love and doing it because you want to and growing the skills, obviously, that will help land a job later, but not necessarily with that company. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and whether it's plugging gaps that employers see in your resume or just making contacts with people who are leaders in your field, volunteering or pro bono projects can help you do both of those. I made this mistake myself in my 20s. I remember volunteering somewhere and I thought, they're telling me they're not going to hire me now, but wait till they see what I can do and then they will hire me. And no, they weren't. They were pretty straight with me that it wasn't going to happen, but I talked myself into thinking that it was otherwise.
Yeah.
And I see
people always think that you can change.
Yeah. So it's a mistake that some people make. It's one I've made, and I encourage listeners to avoid.
The curse of the optimist.
Yes. All right. Well, terrific, good conversation, and thank you, Alexis, for joining us this week, and thank you, our listeners, for downloading this week's episode of Find Your Dream Job. Now, if you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In every issue, we give you the key points of the week's show, and we also include links to all the resources mentioned, as well as the transcript of the full episode. Subscribe to the newsletter now, and we'll send you our new guide, the Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the podcasts that can help you find a great job and get the career you want. Get your free podcast guide. Go to maxlist.org/topcareerpodcasts2017. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be James Hu. He'll explain what you need to know about applicant tracking systems. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.